Good morning. This is Laura Young. I hope this finds you well and in good spirits today. I have on my lucky shirt, so I'm good to go. Today I want to talk with you about a pervasive myth that gaslights women's power, but it starts when we're little girls and teenagers, and thus when we become women. And the myth is that somehow we are weaker and we need someone to take care of us in this big battle world. And the myth is the rescuer myth. And even though you may be an independent woman, I think if you search inside all the unseen crevices, you'll find that there's some part of this myth alive and well and clogging up the works sometimes. The myth of the rescuer, it was passed down by mothers, grandmothers, aunts, teachers. It was passed down because they themselves had never had the opportunity to really experience their full strength in the world. And they were under more patriarchal influence than we are, although patriarchal influence is still alive and well. And so how has it been passed down to you? I'm looking at my notes to be sure I don't miss anything. You know, the things that go on when you're told, you need a rescuer. They don't say those words. Sometimes it's implied. Sometimes it's blatant. You need someone to take care of you in this big battle world. It starts very early and it gets normalized within inside of us. I mean, it was just like in an earlier session, Amy that was playing outside with her brothers, and mother says, don't get dirty, don't yell, don't tear your clothes, don't climb the tree, whereas her brothers were having crazy fun. And then as she came to me as an adult and said, I have no physical courage and I'm raising two daughters and I don't want to pass down to them what I am experiencing and what has been done to me. So at least she was aware enough to know she had been gaslighted by this particular belief. So who's going to be the rescuer? Tell me that. And how has that worked for us really so far? Look around you. The message is who will be the rescuer? Daddy? Well, if it's not daddy and he's not available, will it eventually be your boss that you think should show up and offer you a raise? And even though you haven't had the courage to stand up and be counted with him and say, I deserve a raise, I am worthy of a raise. Other than that, how about if you're encouraged to go to university and subtly or not so subtly pushed to marry the right man? Now, if not the right man, it seems sometimes almost any man. And so we end up with husbands, lovers, who are not good for us. But we hold on to them because inside we have somehow absorbed the idea of being weaker than, what are they telling boys about this? About the world, about their courage. How about the lottery? Some people believe they will win a lottery. Is that the rescuer? Someday my ship will come in, even if I'm just sitting around watching TV and being passive and waiting for something to happen. I mean, this rescuer myth is really damaging because it can be so sly, as well as, it's sly, but sometimes it's blatant and in your face. How about the emperor that has no clothes, who comes galloping into your life, to sweep you off your feet. Well, you've waited a long time for this emperor. Now, do you have the courage at this moment to look at that man and say, hey, not so fast, you're naked? Probably not. Probably you'll not look internally for the answers, but be swept away by the outside glitter. Anyway, there's so many ways that we get caught up in thinking there should be a rescuer or there will be a rescuer. We were trained to believe we were not quite right or not quite enough. I remember years ago, I mean, look at me, it has to be years ago, right? That's why I'm really feel a sense of urgency to kind of get this information to you. It took me a long time to get over many extreme versions of rescuer patriarchal influence. It doesn't have to take you such a long time. It doesn't have to take you a long time at all. I'm kind of like that commercial, the farmer's commercial. And I don't care for commercials or much TV for that matter. But the farmer's commercial says, I know a thing or two because I've seen a thing or two. So that is part of my urgency, is to get some information to you, to say, if you're stuck, really look at some hidden versions of information that has been given to you when you were before the age of reason, and you were given information while you were in a different energy field. You weren't even into beta energy, which is thinking energy. You were into the early emerging energy, and whatever came at you, you believed it to be the truth. Now, I remember like I started to say years ago in an orphanage, I learned Latin. I took Latin in there, and the nuns allowed that because, we could, the Mass was in Latin still. And I learned Latin and served the Mass for the priest from the front pew. Because I was a girl, I was not allowed to serve on the altar. Now, I know this is extreme. So take the extreme, and work it down a ways to today's modification of that kind of ridiculous belief system. Then when there was a holy day and there was going to be a Mass of real importance, the nuns, get this, the nuns borrowed some boys so that the priest could be better served by having the boys on the altar. Boys were allowed to go on the altar, girls were not. So that just seemed kind of normal for us for many years, and it's like, how many ways do we normalize slights and stings? I mean, is there any wonder women have feelings of unworthiness or something is missing inside? So it fuels the belief that we're not complete within ourselves, not strong enough to make it on our own. The world is unsafe. So women are confused, on the one hand, you say, you have strength, stand up and be counted, and it's time, and it's really happening now. But if you have unease and confusion underneath, you're not alone. Feminine power in the 21st century is still misunderstood by a lot of women, by women who still have difficulty being dependent, being open and dependent on their inner resources, because they have been, as I put it, gaslighted, that they're weaker, somehow not sufficient. So there's some split in showing confidence in women themselves. There's some split in also honoring and including other women. You see, if you see yourself as weak, if mother, grandmother, and aunt have all bought the myth and passed it down to you that you're weaker, the weaker sex, and you need a rescuer to be complete in the world, how then can you fully honor other women if you feel insufficient inside? You cannot exactly honor the courage and strength of other women. So you need to explore that, because there's strength in us joining in sisterhood. If you look at the state of the world, it's critical. It's an emergency. For years and decades and centuries, the male power template has been in charge. But what's been happening is that they have been ignoring 50% of the energy and power in the world, which is women's energy. And look at the state of the world. I mean, we have to step. They can't do it. Their power template is insufficient. We cannot either try and become like them. That doesn't suit us. Sometimes women want to be sufficient and independent and grasp the male template and try to do it harder. And then, of course, become more aggressive and less feminine. There's nothing wrong with being assertive and determined, but trying on the male template for power is insufficient. It doesn't suit us. We're creative, we're uniting, we have curiosity, we're intelligent, we think differently than males do, we're more comprehensive in seeing the bigger picture. It's not that we don't have male attributes, we all do. And they have some of ours, they just don't honor them as readily as we honor some of theirs. And we are willing to be beginners over and over. Men, on the other hand, have trouble being beginners, especially if they're experts in a certain area. They have trouble with the humility it takes to be a beginner in a new arena, especially doing inner work. I'll give you an example of a couple of how this played out. There was a couple who met in college. She thought she had met the right man, and it worked really well for a while until a problem cropped up. She had underestimated her degree, and she had underestimated her energy and underestimated everything about her having a successful career. He, on the other hand, assumed his would be, and his was taking off. However, when they came to when they settled in a location, she became very prominent in the arts. She became very successful, and she started loving what she did and the greater good she was bringing to the world. One day he came home and said, well, I'm up for a promotion, but we have to move. And I mean, it meant moving many states away. And something they had never discussed, she by sin of omission had never thought her career would be of any importance, and gave credence to his career. He, by patriarchal assumption, assumed that if he had to move for his career and move for his advancement, his helpmate would be right on the trail with him. However, they were having great difficulties because they never had that conversation. What if? And I ask couples who come for premarital work, please go into the what ifs. And because women's careers do matter, and they're mattering more and more. But this woman, was running a company, but she and was really highly intellectual and advanced in the arts, but I don't know how it came out. I don't know, but it was a predicament that's not unusual with young couples today. I had another woman who was running a large company, had 32 employees, and was loving it and very successful. And she had taken this work when their downturn happened in 2008, and he, who had been in the finance segment of society, became very depressed, anxious and depressed, and started staying at home. And so she moved into her latent career because she hadn't really practiced her talent. She hadn't really taken a real job, as she called it. And she ended up running the company because the owners were older and wanted to travel. So she talked about the fact that at work she felt fully empowered, loved what she did. But coming home, she was concerned about intimidating her depressed husband, and kind of reverted back to a shadow power at home, allowing him to be up front and center with his needs. Anyway, when I saw her, I recommended that I had seen her personally, so I'd recommended they have marital work with somebody else. But I suggested they address the inequities in their marriage and see if they could create an egalitarian marriage and how to get what they had stronger, because she was getting resentful and it wasn't going to last. Anyway, where are we? So I want to be sure that you look at what kinds of stings or slights are you normalizing. This is not about getting angry. The people who taught us this and who passed it down to us, they didn't know, they weren't intentionally hurting us, but it did hurt our core sense of who we are and who we are becoming. So you say, if I find it, how do I find it? If I don't know right off the bat, if I have any of this myth, how do I find it? Well, nothing important comes without some attention, deliberate attention, and determination to explore and to question. First, you have to get really quiet and then go to a deeper level of relaxation and reflect. And reflect your story, your life story, and look at where it's flourishing, and look at places where you may hold yourself back. Don't underestimate the power of personal inquiry. Go back again if you're confused, if you're on a tangent in terms of wondering why. Follow the tangent, ask some more questions. And then when you get a sense of your story around ways you may be perpetuating this, this myth, because you don't want to pass it down if you have daughters. You really want to start early and not perpetuate this myth. But also when you get a sense of your story and how it may impact your life in small ways or not so small. Go and get your journal and journal with no holes barred about what you're feeling, what you're thinking, how this idea of this resonates in your body. Is there an unease sometimes? Is there What is going on when you need to go ask the boss for a raise and you haven't developed fully your worthiness, your sense of okayness to be treated as a strong, independent woman in the world? Notice subtly and blatantly what you're feeling and use your journaling. I encourage people to journal in a reflective, very relaxed mood, because that's the energy field we were in when all these beliefs started coming our way. So what I'd like you to do is journal until you can come up with the storyline that was part of your life when you were a little girl. What were the messages you got, or the messages you didn't get, but you felt? And then you might have some dialogue with the little one. And it's not about staying in a victim role. It's about giving her permission, new permission, to stop the nonsense that was given her by people who didn't know the difference, to change her belief system, to absolutely go for a stronger version of herself, and know that as she does this, missing pieces inside, feelings of missing pieces, starts to fill up. Missing pieces are usually parts of ourselves that have been submerged, or we have normalized things and told ourselves it doesn't matter, or anger that's submerged. Missing pieces, we'll go through that more and more as we go through our series. So I hope what I have given you at least an opening to start searching about the very core of yourself, to see if you're holding any part of this, because it's a faulty belief and it does some terrible damage when we're trying to step up and step out and be counted. So for today, I wish you well. If I go into many faulty beliefs in my most recent book, Remove Obstacles to Experience. I have to read it. I can't, excuse me. I should know this, right? Here's my book. Remove Obstacles to Experience. Unstoppable Feminine Power. How to Stop Betraying Yourself and Live a Life of Grace and Passion, on Amazon, in 2 forms, hard copy and Kindle. And all the best. I wish you well, and see you next week. Bye.